Hi everyone, and welcome to SpotLink TekTalk. This quarter I want to talk to you about IT budgeting, essentially how to make sure that your IT spend is well aligned with your business practices, thus making your business more competitive. We could all use a little help there. So this year I'm going to do it a little differently, and I'm going to start talking about some alternative IT budgeting that we've seen in the past in working with small and medium businesses. Although some of this is going to be a little tongue-in-cheek, in actuality, some of this may actually work best for particular types of businesses. Every business is different, requires a little different approach. So anyway, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the spend only if it's broke approach. I think we've all kind of have some familiarity with that. And it's a simple, very simple budgeting thing. You just don't spend unless you really need to. Of course, the benefit, especially in the very short term, is that it may reduce IT costs. If you don't spend it today, that's a win because you haven't had to spend it today. Of course, the drawbacks can be considerable. It can increase other business costs, usually by considerably more. It can lower your productivity. In cases I've seen, it's easy that workers could have been 30% more productive if they would have had a more structured IT. Of course, you can have work outages too. Things go down, things break, so that increases your labor costs, lost sales, lost reputation. So the downside of that. Another one we've seen is no maintenance support approach. This is probably fairly common out there, especially those that don't have any formal IT assistance, is that they buy something, whether it be hardware and software, and that's it. They don't buy maintenance, they don't buy support. They're just going to live with that until it dies. Of course, this may reduce scheduled recurring costs on maintenance contracts or software upgrades, but of course, you're taking a gamble. You may have lost wages and productivity, lost sales, reputation again, if things break. Likewise, older software may decrease productivity. They do these upgrades to add new features and capabilities. If you don't take advantage of those, you can keep working at the older standards. You may have lost days or even weeks if you have a component that breaks and you don't have a support contract. You may have to go to secondary market, find one on eBay, get it shipped to you, maybe take it all over to a repair center, get it done. We have had this happen, and it's taken as long as 2 weeks, in which during that time the business is just down. You're just twiddling your thumbs, you send them home. And of course, it's much higher repair and replacement costs when you do it spot as opposed to doing it as part of a maintenance program. So the caveat of this is know your cost of downtime before you try this. A lot of people just think of downtime as maybe just labor cost, your internal cost, but there are often significant external costs with facilities, external suppliers, and often even more considerable are the indirect costs with reputation, lost repeat sales. I go into this in much more detail in one of my previous tech talks from just last May, data protection and recovery. So if you want to take a look at that, I kind of go through all the steps to help you calculate your cost of downtime. All right, minimal entry approach. So in this approach, a company will try to, when they have a need, they will buy the minimum they can absolutely get away with. So if you need a printer for your company of 50 people, instead you go out and buy a personal printer and just tell everyone to use that. Likewise, if you have large storage needs, instead of going out and buying an enterprise storage device, you just buy kind of a workgroup storage device and you hope that works fine. And of course, this can reduce your upfront cost. In many cases, it can do that considerably. Of course, the drawbacks are lower performance. instead of having a printer that pumps out 50 pages a minute, you might have one that does 12. Likewise, work group storage, it might be much slower to get files you need and do certain functions. So lower productivity translates to higher labor costs. And of course, again, you have the potential for unexpected work outages when you work something beyond their duty cycle, beyond what they're expected to do. You have much higher incidence of failures. So that, of course, if you have a failure, it can lead to downtime. And you're going to have much higher IT costs to support because simpler equipment used for the enterprise is going to just take more labor hours to keep it up and running. It's usually, in the end, a bad compromise. The other one, spend tomorrow, not today approach. Here is where you want to spend as little as you can this month, and you don't worry about the future. So if you're on a subscription, you're just going to get the shortest term subscription you can, even if it makes you pay much more over the term of what a long-term or perpetual license would cost. Again, the benefit may be to reduce your upfront costs. The drawbacks are you spend much more over time. And this is true both with internal software as well as cloud. In fact, it's very prominent in the cloud. AWS or Azure, if you just spend month by month, it's going to cost you a lot more than a 1-year locked-in contract. Of course, those have pluses and minuses with them as well. Of course, here's a caveat. One of the cases where I said it may work better for a business. In cash-poor, high-growth companies, this may actually make sense. If the additional cost on that is lower than your growth rate, it may actually be better overall to spend a little less now and have more cash to help fuel your growth. Okay, the I don't need that approach. So you decide you don't want to buy backups, you don't want to buy security software. Who needs firewalls? I'll just connect directly to the internet. I don't need to patch any of my software. It's good as is. Again, may reduce some immediate IT costs. Of course, so you have some potential large negative business impact if this gamble fails. If you don't use backups and your computer server catches fire, what are you going to do? Likewise, security software, you get a ransomware across all your computers. You may have to end up paying the criminals to get your data back. Same sort of analogies with firewalls and patching, just more the same sort of risk. So we have seen this. You can try it on your own risk. So, of course, here, overall, the affirmative approaches caveat, all things have a real cost and benefit. So think about that before just making a rash decision to do something to try and reduce your costs. A little phrase I like to use often from the Temple of Forbidden Night at Disneyland: real rewards await those who choose wisely. So choose wisely on your IT budgeting. So now I'm going to go over to what our recommended approach is. Of course, as you'd suspect, it's a little more formalized. So I'm going to do a little disclaimer here. At SpotLink, we are concerned with risk mitigation in regards to data protection and security. We're all about trying to make sure that surprises don't happen. As such, we are typically predisposed to spending a little more money to improve reliability and predictability while reducing risk. The following approach comes from that perspective. So, it's often our job to make sure bad things don't happen. So that dictates that things are a little more predictable and reliable. So first off, let's kind of look at the 6 sources of IT budgeting. This will feed back into the overall step-by-step approach we talk about later. So sustaining labor, that's just the labor that you need day in, day out to just kind of maintain your business. The next one is subscription, support, maintenance renewal. So these are things you pay on a regular basis. It may be monthly, annual, biannual. In some cases, you can buy things on a 3-year package, and those come up every 3 years, even 5. So all those renewals need to be factored in. Hardware, software refresh needs. If you've had equipment that has failed, or you think it's failing, or is just getting too slow, you need to look at refreshing that, whether it be hardware or software, on a periodic basis. The next 2 are bold because those kind of make a bigger impact. Operational improvements. Every year you should look at how are we doing things, how has technology changed, and what could we do to improve our productivity and our profitability. And strategic initiatives are more like, well, we want to expand a business. We want to do some new, it may be a new business unit, a new product line, something, and how's that, you want to plan for what your IT needs are going to be for that initiative. And then your project labor. So usually those operational improvements and strategic initiatives are going to cause you to incur projects, and you need to have project labor available for that. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the sustaining labor budgeting. So that can vary greatly depending upon your what's going on in your company. If your company is very stable, doesn't need a lot of new technology, the running is, in general, you're going to need about 1 hour of IT person per employee per month. But if you have a rapidly changing environment, lots of new technology going in, trying new things, often if you're growing quickly, this can go as high as about 10 hours per employee per month. So there's quite a great gap there. In general, on average, we see about 3% of your overall payroll going to your IT labor. So sustaining labor budgeting types. So of course, your first thought is how much could I pay this person per hour? For in-house, that's leaving out a lot. Of course, you have payroll taxes, benefits, vacation time, sick days, equipment that they use, training for the person, facilities, etc. So that overhead rate on top of that employee can raise their effective hourly rate substantially. And if you use outsourced company, what's your monthly rate for using them? You may have a managed service provider, in which case it's a fixed amount per month, or you may be doing just an hourly engagement. You'll need to look back over time on how it ebbs and flows and what it comes out to on average. And if you're a larger company, you can have a hybrid approach where you may have inside experts and you outsource your help desk to just help with the day-to-day things. Or, and we see this much more often, you have an inside help desk person, a junior person with just a few years experience, and you outsource your advanced IT and your projects. Okay, renewal budgeting, subscription. So here you're looking at things like Office 365. That's a monthly subscription. You're going to factor in how much that's going to cost you over the year. Another example of that is telecom. So your phone and internet expenses. Web hosting that you have out there for your business. That's gotten pretty cheap now, but it's just an example of one of those. And of course, cloud services. If you're starting to move more of your infrastructure to the cloud, that can build up some pretty hefty monthly fees with it. Okay, renewals budgeting, support, and maintenance. So these are what you pay to renew the maintenance on your equipment, so that if an upgrade comes out, you get the upgrade, or if it's hardware and you have a hardware failure, you get a replacement. So these will often apply to like servers, firewalls, routers, switches, etc. on the hardware side. On the software side, support and upgrade on perpetual licenses, such as Microsoft Software Assurance, which is billed biannually. You may have accounting systems that have support agreements so that you can get help as well as get upgrades. As you get into higher accounting systems, those two are separate line items. ERP, CRM, project management, et cetera, et cetera. All those kind of need to have an annual renewal on them in most cases. Okay, so renewals budgeting approach. So this is kind of what we do to help companies get a handle on this. Is review last year's subscriptions, maintenance, support expenses. It's pretty simple. And then look for any new upcoming from previous new purchases that may be on a biannual or triannual renewal period. Are there any contracts up? What are the cost implications? Do you need to re-up at a higher cost? Do you need to switch to a different program? Which feeds into the next one. Can you lower your services? Maybe your internal needs have changed so that you don't need the capabilities you had before. So maybe you can downgrade an equipment or software will get eliminated altogether. And of course, good accounting practices will help you identify all this. That can make the difference from it just being a few keystrokes to get this information to being almost impossible to find. Okay, refresh budgeting. Remember, refresh was what to do if you have failed equipment or older software. So look and see if any of your hardware or software, although software is much less common, any end of life. So traditionally, most hardware vendor, where it be firewalls, switches, routers, servers, they have an end of life on them. The manufacturer says we're only going to support them till that time, and after that, no more updates, no firmware, no security, no patching, and you want to get rid of that because they just won't support it anymore. Of course, if you have any failed or failing equipment, you're probably going to want to look at replacing that. And then in all this, you're going to look, well, what do we want to replace it? Have the business needs changed again? Maybe you move your servers to the cloud, so you don't really need to replace a server that's going end of life or failing. And are there new capabilities and features that are beneficial? Maybe you can exchange some of those. You're probably going to need some experienced IT help to help you with your requirements and design analysis of this phase. Okay, operational improvements budgeting. This is where you look at either steady state scaling or incremental improvements of your current operations. So it may just be expanding staff. You're growing. You're going to add 10% new staff this year. You may have a new office that you're expanding to. You may have added some things that are increasing your productivity on the factory line or something. And you may want to add new features or functions to the systems you currently have to take advantage of those features. Okay, strategic initiative budgeting. As I said, this is where you're trying to put out a new way of doing business. Could be a new business unit, which is going to require new hardware, new software, new systems. Or you may be looking at a migration integration of some existing components on a fairly large scale, such as moving all your services from on-prem servers to the cloud. You may be looking at completely redoing your accounting system, changing from one platform to another, or looking at adding some CRM, ERP type workflow systems. All those are fairly substantial and have a large impact on the organization. So with that, then you have to look at your project labor budgeting. So some of the things you want to look at when you're asking yourself about this, do we have the internal capacity to do this? If not, do we need to bring in a vendor's professional services? If you're going with an accounting system, you might want to hire the professional services staff of that firm to come in and help you with the migration. Or you might want to bring in outsourced project staff, just general IT staff who can help you implement that project. So now I'm going to talk about the strategic IT budgeting process that we kind of use with most of our managed services clients. The concept here is that follow these steps and it will help transform your IT from a cost center drag to a strategic competitive advantage. Okay, step one. Accounting gives you projections of continuing expenses. So projections of labor expenses over the next year, assuming current operations, projections of next year's subscriptions, support, maintenance renewals, etc. Likely accounting will need to work with the CIO to adjust for any anticipated changes. Step two, your CIO will recommend refresh spending. So again, looking at equipment and hardware to replace existing systems, expiring systems. Recommendation should look at the changes in these offerings, and maybe we just don't want to get a same model or an equivalent model. We may want to take advantage of increased or decreased feature needs. And of course, the labor to implement the refresh should be integrated in that, and whether it's coming from capacity or outsourced expertise. All right, and of course, the last part of this, analysis and ramifications of not refreshing it should also be included, so the executive management knows the consequences of rejecting those recommendations. Step three. So here the Chief Operating Officer and your Chief Information Officer get together and recommend operational improvements. The two work together to interactively look at what your operational expenses have been and identify areas that technology can be used to automate or streamline, increase your productivity. Based on those discussions, the CIO recommends operational improvements, and this should include an ROI type analysis, including the labor of what you're going to get for that investment. So here's step four. The CEO and executive management identify strategic initiatives. Executive management feeds to the CIO for analysis any new initiatives that they want to do. The CIO then looks at the technology solutions that will help maximize the business benefits of those initiatives, lowering cost on an ongoing basis as well as increasing productivity. And the CIO recommends to executive management technology plan for those initiatives, including ROI type analysis again. And step five, executive management approves the plan. So executive management, now you've given them all this information. So then using either traditional or agile business planning processes, they approve or disapprove each of the recommendations. Then based on that, step six, whatever's been approved or disapproved, the CIO develops a one-year plan. It gives the exec a one-year projection and a technology spending plan. Labor sources are identified and scheduled, and the plan is supplied back to executive management and accounting. So the end result of this, which is really our job, is by following these steps at the end of the process, your technology will be completely aligned with your business goals. All players will know exactly what is expected of them, when and what's happening. All significant expenses will be anticipated. Operational efficiencies should be maximized, and business impact and results can be measured. So again, no surprises. Everything's just going to happen. as I said, we use this process at most of our managed services clients. Although I would suspect that if you ask them, their first answer would be no, because we integrate it such into the day-to-day mechanisms, how we're doing it, and that it kind of just flows. And your business, too, can use these techniques to just make them part of your day-to-day methodology. And this all kind of happens without you almost even knowing it. And it allows for a much more predictable IT landscape and allows you to make your business a competitive edge. Again, we're always here at SpotLink, happy to answer any questions you have. Feel free to email me. I'm Robert Hood, rhood at spotlink.com. I'm happy to take your questions as well as provide any advice we can. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you at our next Tech Talk.